Hi, this is Philosophy 70, and today's lecture is on the ethics of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche is actually one of our more contemporary philosophers in the sense that he was alive from 1844 to 1900. So a lot of the philosophers we've had so far were in the ancient past. So far ethically, we have looked at Aristotle's virtue theory, Bentham Mill's utilitarianism, and Kant's duty theory or deontology. Those three are the three main significant forms of ethics, the philosophical ethics, not religious ethics. So they are the three that are the most used, and you probably recognize them, just didn't know what they were called when you first heard about them. You know, we've all done some sort of virtue theory in our life where we've thought, well, what would be, the better person? What can I do that would be something a better person or a good person would do? Um, or we've also looked at the consequences, like Bentham and Mill, and said, what's going to pay out, what's going to work out better for everyone. And then there are times when we've just done the right thing because it was the right thing. So with those three main ideas behind us, we're going to look at an alternative view today. So Nietzsche gives us an idea of ethics that is quite different than everything we've seen so far. He gives us an ethics that is based on human nature, or his view of human nature. Nietzsche lived in Germany in the middle 1800s. He viewed human nature as something that was, we were self-interested, we were selfish, and that everything we did was ultimately a selfish act, that there were really no truly altruistic acts. We were just trying to satisfy some desire. So with that human nature, we also have built in, he says, this desire to live fully. And he says that our human nature, in order to live fully, seeks to flourish by dominating and exploiting others. Important term here. That drive to exploit and dominate others is called the will to power. Not willpower, not will of power, but actually will to power. The idea here is that we all have a human nature that drives us to seek power. We want to be the top dog. We want to get everybody else out of our way if they're standing in our way. And that is human nature. That is what we are like. So Nietzsche says what's moral is following our human nature. Okay. So it's kind of a contradiction with the other moral theories that we have seen, which have given us ways to basically get along with other people. This one is saying you're not concerned about getting along with other people. You don't really care about other people. You care about yourself. That's your nature. He also says you can't help but have that nature. So you're born like that. The natural, the right, the moral thing to do is to follow that nature. So he says the current systems of nature, morality that we have, whether they're the Western theories or they come out of religion, he says they're false morality, that it's actually not morality at all. So all of those lessons that tell us to be kind to others, to turn the other cheek, all of those kind of things, he says that's a false morality, and it's only fit for slaves. It's only fit for people who are dominated by the others. And for them, yeah, he doesn't believe they deserve anything. So he says superior individuals must realize their destiny and become more complete men. He sometimes also says more complete beasts. And for him, beasts and men are the same thing. He describes these people as being aggressive, and again, you're seeking to dominate and flourish. There's nothing about that that says get along with others. So If this is what's driving us, and morality is following our nature, our will to power, he breaks morality into two types, two categories. He says we have master morality, which I've been talking about already, and slave morality. So master morality is the true morality. It's the good qualities, right? He says. So the master morality people, he calls them the ruling class. They are the dominant group. They are whoever takes charge, basically, and they are the creators of values. That's important. Master moralists create their values. And he says their values that they create are always correct. Always. So if I am living my life truly as a master moralist and seeking to flourish by domination and exploitation, I'm actually living out my will to power, then it is perfectly all right for me to get rid of someone who's in my way. I want to be the person in charge. I'll take out the person in charge. Get rid of them, off with their heads. Somebody lower than me wants to have my position, well, then they would follow their master morality and take me out. My obligation, of course, is to fight for myself and then try and turn that around to take them out. So it's a pretty dog eat dog cutthroat way to be. So that's master morality. Their qualities, he says, are good. If we look at the list of qualities in your textbook, master morality, a lot of the description that comes that is listed comes out to be the same as our modern definition of sociopath. So these are people who don't care about society. Society is only there to serve them. They're not entitled to, or the people who serve them are not entitled to happiness. Happiness is always only for those who are living their true nature. So again, it goes against a lot of our other views. So that's the first form of morality. The second form of morality is called slave morality, and this is false morality, according to Nietzsche. He says the slave morality is a morality that is followed by the oppressed people, the uncertain, the abused, the timid, people who are afraid of the dominant group, right? And then look at the dominant group, the master moralists, and say, oh, they're evil, right? Because they scare us, they threaten us. Slave morality, the people follow qualities like sympathy, friendliness, it's the whole warm heart, compassionate. We feel that those things are the right way to be. We feel that we should treat others well and we should treat them kindly. All of that kind of behavior, all of that, niceness that I'm describing would be slave morality and would be wrong. It is something that we have been taught through, he says, primarily religion. So Nietzsche was an atheist and he was kind of angry about religion because he said religion has created this false morality, this idea that, the meek shall inherit the earth and those kind of things. And he says weakness is taught to us and we see it as a virtue, and that's absolutely wrong. We have been perverted from our natural way of being. So he's actually quite angry about it. He's calling for a reevaluation of all values. In other words, we look at the values that we as slaves have valued, things like caring for each other and being kind. And we need to look and see what's good about that. It goes against our nature. So why do we care? We shouldn't care. We need to become more complete beasts and live for ourselves. Okay? We might occasionally do something nice. In fact, he talks about the Ubermenschen, or the overhumans. The overhumans at some point have become so powerful that they move to the next stage in development. And they are people who mix their passion with control. So they're living their will to power. They are living as superior people, master moralists. They are in charge. They are the ruling class. They are the creators of value. But they use some of their, some control to rein that in and do things that might to others look like they're nice things, but there's a reason, there's a cause for them doing it. So for example, one of the master moralists who has a lot of money might start throwing dollars out to the public, start trying to help the public and give away money, and people will be thinking, oh look, this guy's really nice. And the reality is, there's no niceness in there at all. He is doing it as a display of his wealth and power. Look, I have so much money, I can just give it to you all. I can do whatever I want, whether it's give you money or, any other objects, or just I let you live, not because I care about you, but because I'm showing I have the control and the power to do that. So again, it's a lot like a sociopath. Society only exists to support the superior people. And all of the people who are not superior, that would be all of the people who are not fast following the master morality, they have been duped by religion and ethical theories that say, be nice. And he, again, has some big issues and wants us to throw that away. Now, all of that being said, it's a fairly simple theory, right? Live according to your nature. Also, we're not responsible for our actions. So here's something. Because he's a determinist, and he says everything we do is determined by other things. I, for example, am born, you are, for example, are born with this will to power. So if you act upon your will to power or follow your will to power, and in doing so, you kill someone, harm someone, steal from someone, he's going to say you couldn't help it. You were acting out your will to power. You were following your values. So no punishment, right? Somebody wants something that you've taken, they should come steal it from you. If they don't, well, then they have become slave types, and who cares is basically what he's saying. So there's a problem with the fact that he says you can't, as in you cannot, help living according to your will to power. Everyone has it, and therefore you have to follow it. The big problem here is, of course, a whole lot of people don't, thank goodness. How does he account for that? You can't, on the one hand, say something cannot be changed, and on the other hand, say, well, all these people changed, and so, it happened. You can't have it both ways. So perhaps the people who are living as friendly people have a will to friendliness or a will to kindness. He never really accommodates that. He also doesn't explain anything about how he is so sure that human nature is to dominate. I mean, that's a huge assumption. Science, philosophy, psychology, nothing has really pointed out a real, universal human nature that all people have, or even the majority of people have. So we have a variety of natures, and there is no one single human nature. So he makes a mistake, I think, when he assumes that human nature is to dominate and to be uh, living the will to power. He also doesn't recognize that flourishing, and he's talking about having a good life where you flourish, you do well, right, requires a harmonious society. You can't flourish if you are constantly looking over your shoulder to see if there is someone there to, trying to sneak up on you and take your position. Now, I can look behind me and say, uh-oh, there is someone sneaking up behind me. It's my dog. And she would happily take my position if she thought she could. But, I mean, that's the point, right? You're always trying to climb up a step, and there's always somebody below you trying to climb up over you. He not only thinks that that's right, which seems problematic, but he says, as you climb the steps, screw over people. Not because you have to, but because you can. In other words, just to show, you have the power, the ability. I'm going to, try to climb to the top, and I'm going to screw over all of these other people. And it really doesn't matter whether they like it. I'm living my will to power. So there's a problem. About Nietzsche personally, well, we know that his father left early, and he was raised in a household full of women. His mother, and now I can't remember if it's one aunt and two sisters or two sisters and one aunt, but basically he was raised in a house with 4 women. And he was a small man. He has what we would call today short man syndrome. In other words, he was not a large man, he was short, and he was trying to prove his masculinity. And when you look at the theory and the ideas here between of master morality, he in a real way is talking about a lot of hyper masculine traits. So he's saying this hyper masculinity is the way to be. He did not live it himself. He wasn't an assertive person. He did have a huge mustache, and your textbooks used to have this this picture in the book. And he had this mustache that came out over his mouth. I mean, it was like Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. And I always joke and say, like, it was so big that he could eat a sandwich in the rain and it would stay dry because this mustache was so big. And the mustache, this excessive mustache, was a technique or a sign. It was in use during the 1800s to prove masculinity. Because he had a big mustache, well, maybe he's short, but he's got a big mustache, so he is a powerful man. Okay, well, a lot of his material was actually taken to the publisher by his sister. And the last 10 years of his life, which is when he wrote his ethical theory, he was blind and insane, and that your textbook tells you that, but it doesn't tell you that he was insane from syphilis. Syphilis is a sexually transmitted disease, and it gets into your bloodstream, and it goes into your brain, and it literally eats holes in your brain. So he had Swiss cheese for brains. I mean, it was missing bits, and more bits were being eaten away every day. But nevertheless, it's an interesting theory. I personally don't subscribe to it or think it's necessarily a good one. Some people did. So, for example, the philosopher Martin Heidegger was a huge fan of Nietzsche. Nietzsche was a big influence on Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger was the official philosopher of the Nazi Party. And you can look at what Nietzsche's saying here and see the influence that it had on the Nazis. The idea of there being a master group or a master race, and that everyone else can be shoved out unless they have a skill that can serve the masters. We can see this idea of the the super person, the over person, the Ubermenschen that will sorry, bug, take over. And if you don't serve a purpose, you're out. If you're seen as a drain on society, you're out. So again, influence on the Nazis. Nietzsche himself was not an anti-Semite. His sister was, though. And it appears, or it seems, that when he gave her his material to take to the publisher, she's the one who inserted and pointed out the anti-Semitism. So she's the one that was pointing out or trying to make a case that it was the Jews who were the inferior people, that the religions based on the Jews or the Hebrew texts were the things that had corrupted people, and so the Jews were bad people. As far as I know, Nietzsche himself never said anything in particular about the Jews. However, he apparently didn't didn't appreciate women that much. So he has master morality. And again, those tend to be a lot of what we look at as male traits: aggressive, powerful, Um, whereas the slave morality, the false one, he calls, tends to have a lot of female qualities or female traits. Things like, docile natures and nurturing, those kind of things. So he is almost doing a split here, saying master, male, good, slave, female, bad, and giving us a big dichotomy between um, powerful and weak, male and female, and we need to all become powerful leaders and exploit each other. Which is why I'm going to exploit you now and tell you to all come to my house this weekend. I have a lot of yard work that needs to be done, and if you want to pass the course, you need to come and do some yard work. Yeah. Okay. So of course I'm joking about that, but that's all I have on Nietzsche.